depanning some of the rice. So the freeze dryer's been defrosted now after the mixed batch of items. There's the water from that mixed batch, so just about a gallon. A little higher than what I would consider the optimum amount of water load, but it's an acceptable amount. We'll get the fan out of there and get this out of the door. I already put the thermometer underneath. Get the plastic disc in place. Get it pre-cooling and ready for batch number 50 of the series. I'm going to start with, I'm using Customize and Start. Give that an hour or so to pre-cool, and then we'll be able to get the food on the trays and get it in there. I need a few more parchment papers for the trays. And this is my last cut roll. That's enough for about 100 trays. So it'll be pretty soon I'll have to do another set. So that's enough for this batch. I could do a bunch of them ahead, and sometimes we do. Okay, now we can get the food out of the freezer and onto the trays. First, we have to figure out which foods we want to do out of the freezer. Interesting side note, I have a list. I know where every bag is in the freeze dryer tubs, on which shelf, which bin. I know how many bags. I have no idea what's in the freezers. Let's go find out. Still have quite a few things in this freezer and in that freezer ready for freeze drying. So we've got meatballs, shrimp, strawberries, peaches, so a whole bunch of fruits and things in that freezer, and 3 or 4 batches of my sister's stuff in there waiting. And then in this freezer we have another half dozen or more batches waiting. But I have a good inventory of all the stuff that's been freeze dried and on the shelves and in the tubs. I just have no idea what we have in the freezers. We make the big batches of things and then we put them in the pans and pre-freeze them, pop them out, put them in the Ziplocs, and then when we get around to them, we freeze dry them. Well, some of them get tucked into the back and forgotten for a while. Now it's time to clear some of those out of there and get them freeze dried and on the freeze dried shelves. We'll find out what we have. We need 10 cubes or 10 squares, or the equivalent of it total, 8 big ones and 4 small ones to fill up the pans. Let's see what we've got. So we've got the pans free-freezing on the top shelf, multiple shelves of things that are ready. Let's find out what we can find. We'll get the trays out. And, okay, we have 2 half blocks and 1 whole block of chili. That'd help. Some blocks of rice. We did some rice recently. Okay, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we need some more half ones. Here's cilantro lime pulled pork. Here's 2 half ones. So we just need 2 more blocks and we'll have enough. 2 blocks of the scalloped potatoes. So then we'll put the rest of them back in there for later. So tray 1, and then I'll record each item. Start with the chili. So the half block first. I'm going to go ahead and tear this out for each component so I can get the weights. So chili 219, and we'll use the full block. So and then a full block of chili, 428. I'm going to add a block of rice. I'm going to put it on the top first to weigh it. So 474. I'll get the total weight of this whole piece for my records. 1876. Tray 2. Tray 2 will be rice. 471. 470. And then the chili. 221. A half block of chili. Tray 3. Cilantro lime pulled pork. Half block. 225. And rice. $4.77, $4.89. And tray 4. Start with that last half block of the cilantro lime pulled pork, $2.25. So it's almost the exact same as the other one, and they should be. That's what they were weighed out to be originally. And then I'll add some scalloped potatoes, and these are big blocks. These are 1.5 pound blocks. $6.91, $6.82. And 23. Wow, this is a big batch if I do that. I wonder if I should take one out completely, because that's more than a pound heavy. Okay, I'm going to take this one out and put it back in the freezer for later. So these will go back in the freezer for another time. So then it's 21.23. All right, so that's still going to be heavy, but it's not going to be as heavy. Now it's only going to be about 1/2 pound heavier than what I like. And then thermometers. I think we can do that right here. So now, got a thermometer all the way in there. When I have mixed batches like this and drill holes, there's certainly going to be crossover with some of the stuff, but as long as they're compatible, you know, the potatoes and the rice, they're fine. The meat and the rice, they're fine. All of those are ready to go into the freeze dryer. We'll move them over there. I've got 3 pounds of the scalloped potatoes, 5 pounds of the rice, 2 pounds of the chili, and then a 1/2 pound block of cilantro lime pulled pork. So get those in there. So as usual, it's way later than a half hour or hour. The freeze dryer's had plenty of time to pre-freeze. It's been about 2 3/4 hours. It's down to, says right now it's down about -40. We'll get the stuff in there real quick. Tray 4. This one will probably take the longest to dry. I'm going to put it up at the top instead of at the bottom. I wonder if I should put it on one of these. Well, that's where I've got it. And then tray 3, so I'll put them upside down to start with. It's got a good seal ring around there already. When I re-close the door, all that hot air starts to contract because the cold barrel, and so it created a slight vacuum and sealed the door nicely. I just put batch 50 into the freeze dryer. It'll be done in a couple of days, and the series of freeze drying your first 50 batches will be done. I'll show all of the food in the bins, all 500 pounds, so we can get a good feel for the size of it, and show the tubs, show how much space it takes to hold the 500 pounds. So I don't have all of the costs because some of the things have been in the freezer for a long time, or some of the things we made. So I'll try to get estimates on all of the costs. I do have the electricity usage, I have the times that it took. So I can get a good amount of the information. There's so many things that I didn't cover in this series. For one thing, rehydrating. I didn't show the rehydrating of these things. We'll move to a bunch of the rehydrating soon. And we'll probably do a few more batches to supplement this 50, just to find out how many will fit in those tubs. Because it looks like I could get at least 5 more batches in those tubs. And it'd be nice to know how much food can fit in 8 of those tubs. So for instance, if you only had room for 8 tubs, can you get 500, 600, 700 pounds? The size of bag you use will make a difference. If we'd bagged it in more bigger bags and less smaller bags, we could get more in those same tubs. But then when I go to use it, it won't be as convenient for how we use it. Okay, we'll be back in a couple of days, or in just a few seconds for you. Don't go away. Batch 50 is in the last few minutes before it's going to stop. So the heaters are going to be turned off now, and it's going to start cooling. The top tray has only made it to 80 degrees. The others are about 115 to 120. The top one, the thermometers in the Scalloped Potatoes, which was the really thick 1.5-pound blocks of Scalloped Potatoes. I should probably do Scalloped Potatoes as 2 3/4 pound and just stack them on top of each other for bagging and rehydration, so I can get the 1.5 pounds I want, because it's taking much longer. This was going to finish late last night. I added 10 more hours so that it would be at this time of the day in the morning. Before I added the time, the trays, the bottom 3 trays were already about 100 degrees, 120 degrees. The top one was only 20 degrees. So they're just slightly warmer now, but the top one is up to 80 now. It still isn't dry. I know at 80 degrees that that tray is not dry. It will lose more weight. The other ones are probably dry and probably have been dry for many hours. They might have even been dry last night before I added 10 more hours. We'll take them out, weigh them, switch the tray positions, put them back in for a couple hours. I'm going to assume the top one's going to need quite a few hours. I'm going to assume at this point, until we test it, that the bottom 3 are probably done, and I'll bag those in 2 or 3 hours from now, but the top one will need more time. That's the big issue of mixing different foods in the same batch, is sometimes some of them take a lot more time than the other ones. And the thick blocks of Scalloped Potatoes are a good example of that. They just take a lot more time, and it's not just that there's more material there, it's just that it's so thick. It's thicker than you should put in the freeze dryer, but I did it. Okay, so let's arrow past the rest of the time, get them out, and check them. Okay, so get past the last of that. Get the drain valve open. And you're ready to check them. So I've got tray 1 on the bottom right now. So we'll start at the bottom with tray 1. Okay, so 1090. So that's down almost 800 grams. Tray 2. 1148. So these two will switch positions. So I'll take 2 down a spot, and tray 1. And tray 1, when I feel the bottom of it, is definitely cooler. So I'll put it up 1. So tray 3. So tray 3, 1179. Tray 4, and 1060. Okay, so this one will go, I'll bring it down a tray position, and this still feels cool. Yeah, everything else feels nice and warm. That feels cool still. It's simply not done yet. Okay, so I'll bring that one down here to one of the warmest positions. And this one can go up here. Yeehaw! So we're going to put it back in there for 2 or 3 hours. And the time will be dependent on when I can be back here to check it. I'm not going to be surprised if tray 1 loses a fairly significant amount of water and that the other ones don't lose anything. And if that's the case, then I'll bag the other ones and leave the tray 1 in for a longer time. So let's get it restarted. Okay, so more dry time. It is closed. And I don't have to let it cool any longer because the fan, it's nice and cold. And I'm going to go ahead and bump it up to 3 hours just in case. I can always bring it back down, and 15 minutes. We'll be back in just a second. 2 or 3 hours. Don't go away. Just over 3 hours later. So it's in the last few minutes. We'll get it stopped, weighed, and checked. I have a feeling that 3 of the trays are done and that 1 is still not. Let's get them out and check them. Okay, so arrow past the last of it. So open the drain valve and see what we've got. Okay, tray 1. 1089, so down by a single gram in 3 hours. 1089. So if that's the biggest loss, I'll probably live with that. Let's check tray 2. $11.48, so no change. And tray 3. $11.78. So before it was $11.79 and bouncing down to 8. Now it's a solid $11.78, so it's a small fraction of a gram. I'm going to say that that's done. And then finally, tray 4. And that's down 11 grams. So 1049. And that's kind of what I expected. A pretty big drop. These do feel warm now, so that's a plus. So this one's going back in, going to take the rest of them out and defrost, or not defrost. So I'm going to take the rest of these out and bag them. Get that one back in there. And I'm going to put it on this shelf, the one with the temperature probe, and get it restarted. It's back in there. I've got a good seal ring around it already, which really doesn't matter because I'm right here. I'm going to start it right now. But I'll get that one restarted, and I'll check the previous batch of scalloped potatoes and find out how long that one took. This one might be similar. And the scalloped potatoes, I believe, was one of the longest batches we've had in this series because they're just so thick. It was a bad plan making them that thick, except for that's the way we like to rehydrate them and eat them. We'll get this restarted. We'll get the other stuff moved over for bagging. So the bagging is going to be a little bit louder because this is going to be running. For the time, since these didn't lose any weight, I'm going to back that up a couple hours. But it also had 10 extra hours, so I don't know how long these other ones took. But we know that it was done before 3 hours ago, so 46:43. So now we'll restart with more dry time. It is closed. Continue and go. And I'll give it 3 more hours. Now we'll go over to the bagging. We'll get the weights of the first 3 trays and figure out how to bag those while we're waiting for tray 4. So tray 1, and get that thermometer out. 1081. Tray 2, 1140. Tray 3, 1170. And then we can get the weights of the individual components. So I'm going to add this piece of parchment paper on here, zero that out, and I'll try to get these blocks. So tray 3, I had 2 blocks of rice. Going to try to get them out without having them come apart. So that was the 889 one, or 489. Now it's 176. 174, 175, so somewhere in there. But that'll tell me how much water each one of those blocks need. I'll see if I can get this one also. Got to be very gentle so I don't break these up and lose part of it. So now we can get them bagged. So I'm going to put the big block of chili in a bag and then the 2 little blocks in a separate bag. We know the weight of those, can calculate how much water it needs. So this was 428 grams. And now 326 grams of water needed. So this block started out at 428 grams. It was about 2 cups, and it needs 326 grams to rehydrate it to the same amount. So I've got the batch number, what it is, and the date that it went into the freeze dryer. I'm going to put this over here so it doesn't get mixed up with anything. And then I'm going to just use this little funnel, or the little scoop for now, because then I can just crush it very lightly, because I don't want to break the beans up or anything. So that's the bag for the chili. I'll get the other two, this little half one, and I'll put this rice aside for right now. So I'll get the weight of those two, take these 2 blocks and kind of crush them up same way. So again, gently, because we don't want to powder the beans or the ground beef or anything. We just want to make it squishy or powdered enough to get it in the bag. That's about 2 cups of chili. It was 440 grams before, and it needs 337 grams to rehydrate it to the same amount. We've got the 1 little block of cilantro lime pulled pork. So I'm going to kind of crumble that up to fit it in a pint bag. I'm going to move this one over. And this, the cilantro lime pulled pork, there's very little sauce in there, but I still don't want to damage the chunks of pork. So I'm going to crumble them just as little as possible needed to get them in this bag. And it shouldn't take too much. It's like a little single serving bag. That one's done. Now I just have the rice ones. I've got 5 of them. I'll be right back with the bags. All these blocks were almost the same. They're all within just a few grams of each other. So I've labeled all the bags the same as about 2 cups, 470 grams, and that they need 300 grams of water added. I'll put 1 in each bag, so I'm going to crumble them up enough to get them in those. The fact that I cooked these with chicken broth, they've got a pretty thick sauce on them, and so they're a little bit harder to crumble. So I'm going to crumble them up on this area and then get them into the bag. Yeah, those are really quite firmly attached. So I don't know if those are small enough, but I really don't want to just crush them. I'll see if those will fit, or if I need to crunch them more. Yeah, so I have to break them up a little bit more to get them in there. Okay, well, that's really full, so I'm going to break these other ones up a little bit more than that. I'm not real happy with how bulgy that is, with all the sharp pointy bits. Let's figure out how to break these up more. Okay, finish those up and get ready for the next step. We've got the first 3 trays bagged in 7 quart bags and 1 pint bag. We'll go ahead and get those sealed with 300 cc oxygen absorbers, and then we'll wait for the other tray before we get them in the bins. 2, 4, 6, 8. And I'll reseal these others. We'll get these in there, and I'll kind of tuck them down the side, make sure I don't end up with them in the seal, especially on these rice ones because I got them so full. Then we'll get them zippered shut, pushing out as much air as I can, but there's not much space on most of these. And these rice ones are very full the way I put them in there. Very chunky. Well, that's because I used a chicken broth that was very thick, and so it really stuck to them together as a block. I might have been better off just breaking them in half and putting them in a 2 quart bag and not even trying, because it would have fit much better. These are really full. These are ones I'd worry about because it's really pushing out the bag. I'll get them sealed with the impulse sealer. And I'm going to do it twice real quick. I've got a question. What kind of sealer do you have? Harvest Right has a really nice looking sealer now. I assume it's basically the same as this, just branded for them, but I don't know. So what are you using to seal your bags? And are you happy with it? Last, we'll get the gross weight on each bag. So if it starts drawing in moisture through the bag, we'll be able to tell. And if it's bouncing like this, 99 to 100, I'll take the higher number and we'll get the weight on each one, and they'll be ready to put in the bin as soon as we get those last two bags of scalloped potatoes out of the freeze dryer, or last two blocks of scalloped potatoes out of the freeze dryer. So those are all ready for the storage. Well, we're down to the last 7 minutes. Going to go ahead and bypass the rest of that to get it out and check it. We'll open the drain valve. And checking tray only. Okay, it's all nice and warm. We'll see if it lost additional weight. And 1046. So it lost 3 more grams. So it's probably done this time. But I'm going to go ahead and put it in for a couple more hours just to be 100% sure. Let's give it a little bit more. So I'm going to put it back in the same spot. And it's about 110 degrees right now. So it's almost surely dry now. But the only way I can be positive is to put it in a little while longer and check it. So I'll give it another couple hours and see how that does. 3 grams is not a lot, considering it was about 1,350 grams to start with. So that's less than a 1% water by weight. That's pretty good. So even if we consider what it weighs now, which is about 300 grams, that's only a 1% water by weight now. So 1,300 grams with 3 grams, now it's still, the dry weight is still less than 1% of water by weight. So that's looking really good, but I'm going to give it a couple more hours so I can be totally happy with it. Drain valve is closed. I'm going to hit more dry time. It is closed. Continue. And it's cool enough. And I'll give it 15 more minutes to make sure. And we'll come back and check it in a couple more hours. I'm not in a giant rush as much as, I mean, I'd like to have it done, but I don't want to bag anything with water in it. Okay, I'll be right back. It's been just over 2 hours, 2 hours, 3 minutes. It's time to take them out again and check them. This time they'll be done. To be more precise, this means they were done 2 hours ago if they didn't lose weight now. We'll bypass the rest of the time with the down arrow and open the drain valve. And as soon as the pressure is equalized, we'll open it. And tray only. Well, golly, another 2 grams. Let's double check it and make sure that it's properly zeroed out. Okay. We'll zero it out here. Okay, 1045. So 1 gram in 2 hours. Do I feel confident with that? Well, do you feel lucky? I'm going to hit the no defrost button. I'm going to call that done. It went down at the most 1 gram. It might be part of a gram. It was kind of bouncing on the scale. The number was kind of bouncing. So at most it was about 1 gram in 2 hours with 3 pounds of food. And now it's over 300 grams of food, or around 300 grams. Let me check. So it's just about 300 grams of food left here as it's dry. So if it were 1 gram, that would still be only 1/3 of 1%. Very, very low. So let's go ahead and take this over and bag these. So it's showing 55 hours for the scalloped potatoes. I'm going to get my defrost baffle on the shelf and the fan in the door and start it defrosting. And once again, because of timing, I'm not going to start the next batch until tomorrow morning because I just don't feel like it. You could easily start another one tonight, but it would be late and I'm not in that big of a rush. So we're going to get the power usage on this and then go bag those 2 pieces. So the total power for that whole batch was 36.16 kilowatt hours. Now that's 3.5 kilowatt hours past where I took out the rest of the food out of this batch. So that's quite a lot. Okay, we'll reset that, get it ready for the next batch. Now we can finally get tray 4 taken care of. So 1039 is the final weight on that. And we have 2 blocks of that. And so I want to weigh each block individually, but I'll put them in the bags. So I'm using these big flat bags. I don't even know what these were called because these I've had for a long time. If you called these a gallon, that would be silly because you couldn't get a gallon in there because there's no gusseted bottom or anything. Maybe they're half gallon? I do not know. It's been so long since I got them, I don't know what they're called. I'll zero out the scale with one of the bags on it. And then I can slide one of these in there and weigh it. I know what they weighed before. They were 1.5 pounds, so I've got on the bag already the batch number 550 scalloped potatoes that they went in on 8/3/22. They were 1.5 pounds, and then I'll put the amount of water needed, and I'll get that as soon as I put them in there. Need to find out which one's which and then weigh them. Okay, now I can put that whole thing on the scale. Okay, so now this one was 691. That slid in there. Go make sure it's not touching anything. Okay, it's not. So the net weight is now 142 grams for that block. So about 550 grams. I'm rounding it off to 550 grams that this one needs. And we'll get the other one. This one was 682, and now it's 100. Make sure it's not touching anything. 148. And I'll just round that down to 530 grams. Now on these, I'm going to add 500 cc oxygen absorbers. Slide one in each one. I'm going to seal the top except for a little bit. So then I can put a straw in that part and seal around it easier. Oh, I'm just putting a straw in and sucking some air out of that after sealing the top most of the way. That way I can just kind of wrap it around there. And then by folding it over it, then it stays sealed pretty well. And I get the extra air out and then get it sealed. Okay. And I'll cut off the excess because this bag's quite a bit bigger than necessary. Beautiful. Do the same thing on this one. Kind of a little bit of a diagonal to leave a little bit of a space open. Close it too much, I can just cut a piece off. It's not a big deal. Quite a bit of extra bag on here. Okay, let that cool for a few seconds. Okay. And as usual, I'm going to add the gross weight to each bag. So if it ever has a problem, I'll be able to just put it on the scale and find out. So 170 grams for that whole bag and everything in it. Let's go get this batch in the bins. Batch 50 is done. So the first 50 batches were over 500 pounds, and I'll do a wrap-up video next, and we'll go over all the details, or as many details as I have. But batch 50 is done and ready to go into a tub. I found that there's a couple of tubs that have plenty of space for a batch, so I'm planning on putting this one into bin 5. We'll open it up and check it, see if we're going to put it in 5 or 4 or some in each. So we've got a total of 8 bins. They're a little less than totally full, so we could put a little bit more in there. I'm pretty sure we could get 2 or 3 more batches, so 20 or 30 more pounds. And once again, the scalloped potatoes took a long time. We did scalloped potatoes 20 batches ago, and they took about 53 hours. So this one also was over 50 hours. So it's one of the longest batches. And to be fair, the scalloped potatoes were also the biggest things we put on the trays. They were 1.5 pounds for each square. Everything else was 1 pound or at the most 500 grams, which would be about 1.1 pounds. So these were by far the biggest, heaviest blocks. So it stands to reason that they took longer. Anyway, let's get them in the bins and move on to the next thing. So I've got bin 5 down, and there's definitely room for an entire batch in here. There's easily space for another batch in bin 4, maybe even 2 batches depending on what it is. That will be one of the things I want to kind of look at, is to find out how much could you fit in just 8 of these tubs. Now we know that 500 pounds or 50 batches will fit in 8 of these tubs. How much would fit? Could we get 530 pounds, 540 pounds? It could be worth checking. This one's bin 5, and interestingly enough, it's from the scalloped potatoes, or the scalloped potatoes were during that batch. So I'll go ahead and add 2 more scalloped potatoes into this one, and the rice with the chicken broth. And these have already started to suck down with the oxygen absorber pulling out, or absorbing the oxygen, or converting it. However you like to think of what the oxygen absorber does. Okay, and then some chili, and another chili, and finally the cilantro lime pulled pork. And there's definitely room for 1, 2, 3, at least a half dozen more bags. Yeah, easily a half dozen more bags. Until the next time, we're moving on. So all of the batches, what they weighed before, what they weighed after, the number of bags of each size, the total time, the power usage, the costs of the food, the bag, the oxygen absorbers, and the electricity, total costs.